So yan, mapagpala pong umaga sa inyong lahat, and I just want to share my devotion this morning to you all. So buksan po natin Biblia sa Luke chapter 14 verse 25. So nakasad po dito, great crowds were following Jesus. He turned around and said to them, "If you want to be my follower, you must love me more than your own father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, more than your own life. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. And you cannot be my disciple if you do not carry your own cross and follow me." You know, in our Christian life, sometimes may nagkakaroon tayo ng connotation that being with Christ is all about joy, it's all about grace, it's all about forgiveness and kindness and all the happiness that we can have in this world. Now, I'm not against that, because Christianity is indeed, the joy of Christianity is indeed there. At napaka-importante po talaga ng kagalakan sa ating puso, yung nagre-rejoice tayo sa presensya ng Panginoon for who He is and what He has done, especially when God provides. But not only when God provides, but we have a revelation of who He is through reading His Word, that napakabuti niya at napakatapat niya at wala siyang katulad, wala siyang kapantay, and all of that we can see about who God is. But in our Christian life, that's not all that we will do. There will be a lot of times that we will suffer. There are a lot of times that we will face fiery trials that we have never seen before. Actually, nung naging Kristiyano ka, mas lalo nagkaroon ka ng magkakaroon ka ng mas matinding pagsubok kaysa unbeliever ka. Why? Because the enemy has made you like his like a bullseye. You're like a walking bullseye in the eyes of the enemy, because he wants you to be out of God's presence. He wants you to be out of His fellowship. He doesn't want you to have a deep relationship with Him. So being a follower of Christ is not easy. You know, yung sinabi dito ni Jesus na, if you want to be my disciple, you must take up your cross and follow me. Otherwise, you cannot be my disciple. You know, sa atin, yung connotation sa atin ng cross, we always think of the grace of God, the love of God, the forgiveness of God, and all of those good things. And that indeed is true. But in the first century, hindi yan ang masasabi ng mga tao. Let's look at the historical context. What is the cross in the first century? The cross of the first century only symbolizes agony, pain, suffering, humiliation, and all of those just bad things and horrible things that they think of the cross. A.W. Tozer once said that one thing that we can know about a man who's going to the cross is not going back. So that's the cross in the first century. Nung sinabi ni Jesus na take up your cross and follow me, they weren't rejoicing na yes, ito yung love at forgiveness ng Lord. No, they know what He means. And He said that if you don't love me more than your father, more than your mother, or than your sister or brother, or than your family, you cannot be my disciple. You know, discipleship in Christ starts with love. Let's always remember that before He makes us a worker, He makes us a worshiper. He first reveals Himself to us. He reveals His goodness so that we may have the ability to love Him. And this is the first command of God, to love Him more than anything else. It means that you adore Him, you value Him, you treasure Him more than anything in this world. Hindi siya nagiging like pangalawa sa buhay mo. There's a place in His heart that, number one, He is enough, and number two, that He is sufficient, that He is all that there is in your heart, and you adore Him above all else, more than your life, more than your ministry, more than your family. And that is loving God, and that is the only way for us to become His disciple, is that we love Him and adore Him and treasure Him above all else we can see in this world. And after that, Jesus began talking about, in verse 28 to 33, that, "But don't begin until you count the cost, for who would begin construction of a building without first getting estimates and then checking to see if there is enough money to pay the bills? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of funds." Didiscuss dito ni Jesus that we must first count the cost of what discipleship really is. Ano yung cost? Half of our lives, our plans, our time? No, those aren't enough. The cost is everything. Absolutely everything in our lives. We must give it and surrender it to God. And after that, after we have done that, sinabi dito ni Jesus sa verse 34, salt is good for seasoning. But if it loses its flavor, how do you make it salty again? Flavorless salt is good neither for the soil nor for fertilizer. It is thrown away. Anyone who is willing to hear should listen and understand. Bakit ito biglang sinabi ni Jesus sa isang context? Na following Him, yung total obedience, yung total surrender. Tapos bigla na lang, as in what? As in? Well, there is such deep significance in this. Because nung una, sinabi ni Jesus, you must love Him above all else. At pangalawa, sinabi niya that you must follow Him at all cost. May significance in the order na sinabi ni Jesus. Because we must love first before we follow. Because it's so hard to follow something that we don't know and we don't love. Sinasabi sa isang quote that our hearts cannot love what our minds doesn't know. That's so true. So, Jesus commands us to know and love Him first before we must obey Him. Because we can never obey Him if He is not our greatest desire. If He is not our greatest treasure. And after that, after the total adoration, the total surrender, and total obedience, at sinabi ni Jesus about being salt. Because the only way that we can be the salt of this world is that we adore Him above all else and fully surrender our lives to Him. That leads to total obedience. Hindi ka magiging ilaw, hindi ka magiging asin ng mundong ito kung hindi si Kristo nagiging ang sentro ng buhay mo. You will not make a difference, an impact in this dark and broken world if Christ is not the center of your life. Mga kapatid, magpagamit tayo sa Panginoon. It's going to be so hard. Yet, it's gonna be so worth it. Because of the unspeakable joy and glory of knowing Him and following Him. And surrendering our lives to the one who has already surrendered all for us.